always like starting by saying, why are we doing this work? We're talking about transformation just beyond what we call compliance. Why are we doing this work? And I'm hoping everyone in the room will agree with me that we're doing this work more than just the organizations that you work for. We're doing this work for social cohesion because we want a society that works towards the well-being of all its members, a society that fights exclusion and marginalization, society that creates sense of belonging, promotes trust, and offers its members the opportunity for upward mobility. This year, I think I'll be 19 years working in this field of transformation, diversity in its broader sense. And in all my 19 years, if I share with you, I have never met someone who does not want upward mobility. Whether it's a woman who's cleaning the floors in my house or a gentleman who's cleaning the windows in my office, everyone wants upward mobility. That is why I like a quote by Ernest Hemingway, who says that there is nothing noble in someone being superior to somebody else. The greatest nobility is being superior to your former self. That if all of us sitting here, if we were to say, am I a better Nene than I was last year? That would be the greatest nobility, to know that there would therefore not be any need to look at anyone lower than ourselves, because we will know that each and every person is actually looking for upward mobility in our world. So what is guiding us in this journey? Clearly, you know, I often remind people that, remember that little book that all of us were supposed to read called the Constitution, that I know many haven't necessarily read, that if that small book, if you haven't read it, at least there's one page in that book that we must read. That is called the preamble of the Constitution. What guides us in this work? So the one page summarizes why we are embarking on a journey like this, because it says, and I'll only talk about the bold areas of that one page, we, collectively, we, the people of South Africa. You know, and then it says, we believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. Why are we doing this work? To heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, justice, and fundamental human rights. And then it says we want to improve the quality of life of all its citizens. So that is why I'm saying, even if you haven't read the whole book, but if you at least know that one page of the Constitution, that we are guided by something, there is a North Star that is guiding us somewhere. And often we talk about this topic and we never take time to actually define what we mean. So if the three words, if you say what is transformation, what is diversity, what is equity, what is inclusion, and by the way, you'll notice that language has changed. I sit on a global forum of diversity that sort of collects or invites what they call practitioners around the world on diversity and inclusion. So language has changed. We no longer say diversity and inclusion, D&I only. It's DEI, because the E in the middle being diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there was a realization that if you only talk about diversity and inclusion and miss the critical aspect of equity, to say you need to also be creating equity in the organization, which is where then the word transformation comes in. If you look at the three collectively, it gives you that comprehensive meaning. So let's start with transformation. What is transformation? And I like saying that so transformation is not a South African word. It's just an English word. You know, often we go to the organizations and the minute you say transformation, they interpret it the way it has been misrepresented. So first of all, transformation is not numbers only. Transformation is much broader than that. So in terms of its meaning, and there are many definitions. The one for me that I like, it says, it's a process of profound and radical change that orients an organization or institution in a new direction and takes it to an entirely different level of effectiveness. So if you were to underline that actually the purpose of transforming anything is to ensure that you get an improved level of effectiveness. It implies basic change of character with little or no resemblance with the past configuration or structure. So if you have successfully transformed, if you look at the new picture, the new touch and feel, the new atmosphere and culture that you have transformed, if you look back, it should look different from where you come from. So ideally, this is how we need to be positioning what we call transformation. Yes, we would be invited in some of the companies, and they say, don't use the word transformation, don't you? I said, no. Let's educate people on what it means rather than avoid using the word transform. If you want to transform, you want to transform. So use the word and rather reposition and educate people who have understood the word wrongly. The second one, for me, first of all, if you look at that in terms of what is diversity, if you go to Section 9 of the Constitution, I'm passionate with our Constitution because people have done a lot of work there. Section 9 of the Constitution, in Chapter 2 in particular, there's this big paragraph that says no one is allowed to discriminate directly or indirectly based on, and then race, gender, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic and social, whatever. It describes that whole paragraph. However, for me, a working definition that I found very useful is that diversity is a collective mixture of differences and similarities and related complexities and tensions. Would anyone agree with me that diversity brings tension and complexity? Yes, because as leaders, we like standing and saying, oh, diversity is good for business. Diversity is great. I always say that is true, but that is half the story. It is good for business on condition you do something. So diversity on its own, you can have a department, you can have an exco, you can have a whole division that is as diverse as this rainbow. But you'll still find that there's something wrong in that. So diversity is good for business, but it needs to have something else, which is what comes in here. That whenever we talk about diversity as well, I did share with you, I do work in different countries all over the world. And I have discovered that every country has what we call its own pain points with regards to where the energy goes with regards to diversity. And in South Africa, where does the energy go with regards to diversity? Race. Those are the pain points, and then gender. The two pain points. You'd be working, I did a workshop in Bangladesh. During tea time, one of the leaders called me and said, I know you're from South Africa, you guys talk about gender this way. Please understand that here, gender and religion are so intertwined. So tread carefully when you talk. I did a workshop in Germany, in Berlin, in Hamburg, in Germany. There, immediately gender was like this. So there is no country in those that I have traveled to, there is no country that does not have one area of that long paragraph, one area of diversity that seems to draw its energy. Now, here at home, really, race does draw its energy. And sometimes it tends to frustrate people. I do not think you can successfully transform without touching on those things that we call courageous and difficult conversations. So I often say to leaders, never go to a town hall meeting or a big fish bowl, whatever the different names are called, and start by saying, today, let's not talk about race. It doesn't work. It's like if I say to you, please don't think of a pink elephant. What are you doing right now? You are thinking of a pink elephant. So it's like, and I know it's because of frustration. So it's like the way as a leader you need to position it is that it is one thing, we cannot plaster the cracks, we cannot hide it under the carpet. We have to confront it. You cannot spend the whole day just dealing with race because there, as I showed you a paragraph, there are many other dimensions of diversity. However, it is important enough because of our historical context. And if you avoid this conversation, it does come back to bite you, right? I watch a lot of animal documentaries, and I was whether National Geographic or whatever, and I was watching this one day, and they said when the lions go hunt for an impala, right? They put the two male lions in the front, and then they put the female lion, the lioness, in the opposite direction. And we know which one is dangerous, ne? Viva women. They put the the female lion in the opposite direction. So when the male lion, the roar of the male lion, makes the impala to run away from the noise, right? Run that way. Their strategy, they know that when you run away from the noise, you're actually going to end up where the real danger is, because they know that they've put the female lion in the opposite direction. Now think back and to say, if an organization is avoiding, for example, a conversation on race, right? Let me ask you, forget about an organization. If any of you in this room, if you have an important conversation that you need to have with your spouse, and you don't have it, does it go away? Never. It develops horns. It becomes more complex tomorrow. So that's why we talk about courageous, uncomfortable conversations. So in every country, in their broad description of what diversity is, you find that in some countries, I was working the other day, in some countries in Ghana, sexual orientation is a big one. In Zimbabwe. And so every country has its own pain points. And you need to understand that those that are multinationals, then you have multiple pain points that you need to look at. So what is important here is to understand that those difficult conversations, if you want to successfully transform, you need to confront them. I like Eckhart Tolle, who says, whatever you fight, you strengthen. What you resist persists. That thing that you are running away from, it waits for you. So for us to succeed, we need to say, rather, how do we equip leaders? How do we equip managers with the muscle to be able to engage in those difficult conversations, right? So that was diversity. Inclusion, what does inclusion mean? I always say the most important part is that I. That is why it's like that. That inclusion starts with I, right? So the definition of inclusion that over the years we've put together in my company is that unlike diversity, you know, here Dr. Gule and Mr. Tima are two black males, okay? As long as there's more than one person, there's always diversity. One might be of a different faith, religion, marriage or not. As long as there's more than one person, diversity is, you can increase the range of diversity. On the contrary, though, inclusion is what we call a call to action. Inclusion is a doing word. You need to do something to ensure that it doesn't happen automatically. You have to fold your sleeves and ensure that you create inclusion in your environment. It's being constantly vigilant, looking out for the not so obvious, and open to a variety of ideas and perspectives. It's actively, underline that, actively inviting those who are included. If I'm a head of a division, a department, I need to know that if there are some people in my section that are not invited, I have a role as a leader, actively inviting those who are included and to ensure that they feel part and parcel of. It's ensuring that everyone is allowed to bring their best to the workplace, their best to the workplace. And here, sorry, I was doing about the school environment here because it applies all over. Choosing to include yourself. You know, there are people that in any environment, I can report to you for 6 months. And you can be clueless that I'm excluded in your team because I haven't spoken up, right? So I also have to speak up if I feel excluded. It's important that those who are excluded speak up. But it doesn't mean that when you speak up, okay, things will be solved. But at least I'll know that my conscience is clear. So this is what inclusion is all about. The last definition is equity, right? We said DEI, in the middle is that E, that if you skip that E, then you are not successfully transforming. DEI, number one, you can see those pictures on the left and on the right. Equality and equity are two different things. Equality, you can see that that young boy who's much shorter than the one in the middle, than the one who's taller, who can grab the apple is the one who's taller, right? That's equality. If you treat all of them the same, you're saying all of you get the same stay, thingy. And then if you are saying equity, on the contrary, equity is in recognition of the fact that for whatever has happened in your system, you need to then ensure that you advance others. So you can look at the second picture. The second picture, you're not taking away from the tall one the steps that he was on top of. You're not taking it away, but you are elevating the other two so that's what equity versus equality. Unless we grapple with these definitions in the workplace, we'll be forever missing the point. And this, for me, is foundational kind of engagement. It's important for us to grapple with them and say, we will only successfully transform when we know what this definition means. And there are two important models that I often talk about in transformation, diversity, inclusion. Number one, you have to do this work at what we call the intrapersonal level. Meaning, hold up the mirror. What is it? If I'm saying my boss is not changing, if I say Ezra is discriminating, he's not changing, am I being that which I'm accusing him of not being, myself? So I need to start with me, and then we need to do the work at an interpersonal level. One of the biggest problems that I can tell you, though, is that many organizations stop at the top part of the triangle. And why? It's because they take people through sausage machines of workshops. How many times, I can just ask you, how many times have you been to some or other diversity workshop? People go through lots of workshops. And the problem why that doesn't work is that you go through a very good one, and then so what? After a workshop. You cannot stop there. You also have to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion at a systemic level to say what are the policies, systems, procedures in the organization, and then at the stakeholder level. Just giving one example at a systemic level. Ezra and I are working on the same floor. We're doing more or less the same work. We've done work at an intrapersonal level. Between us, we've been through dialogues. We respect each other. We are even buddies. And then tomorrow, I discover that our boss, the company pays him 30% more than me. It doesn't matter what we did at an intrapersonal level. It doesn't matter. I look at him and say, how come the system favors you now? Underline the following. Ezra has not paid himself that amount of money. He does not necessarily agree with the fact that he earns, but Oksalayo, he's the beneficiary. Ne? At the end of the day, he's the beneficiary of that. So why organizations cause conflict is that they only want people to do the work at the top of the triangle through workshops. The company must come to the party as well to ensure that the policies, system, practices, and procedures also talk the same language. And then on the other side is where the stakeholders, that you don't exist for yourself. Whatever company you work for, organization you work for, it's important. The reputation is important. That when I look at the logo of your organization, whichever organization you come from, what do I see? What are the imprints in my mind? Do I see an organization that's progressive, that wants to transform? Or do I just see an organization that's interested in profit and doesn't care about people? So reputation also matters. You need to look at this at all the three sides of the triangle. The third, the second model we use is called the head, heart, and hands. And I'm sure you know the H3 model, but I'm using it slightly differently here to say a sustainable journey to transformation is that unless you align the head, the heart, and the hands, it will not be sustainable. For example, can I just test with you, how many of you in the room, time for confessions, in the last 12 months, how many of you have received speeding fines? Time for confessions. I'm one of them, okay? Now, if I ask all the people who raise their hands, right? You've got a driver's license, right? It's a fair assumption. You've got a driver's license, and you know what is wrong, what is right, ne? When we drive on that highway, and then you see that car under the bridge, ne? The white car under the bridge. What happens to accelerator? Slow down. And then you pass, and then let's say you're good when you pass the officers. After you pass them, what happens? You know why? It's because you are driven by compliance. All you are doing, you are avoiding to be arrested. That's all. So if you look at it in that context, that because I'm avoiding to be arrested, I just want to look good when the traffic officer is next to me. So where you haven't aligned the head, heart, and hands is that if you are driven by the head only, you are driven by compliance. And compliance is important. That's where in organizations, that's where targets sit. We need how many women, people with disabilities, how many black people. Targets are good. But if they remain head level only, that's a problem. And often people don't drop from head to the heart. And the heart, therefore, is the emotional buy-in, the connection. I always use the example that I'm sure you have listened. Politicians always give us free material. I'm sure you've listened to a politician give a speech, and you can tell that this one received this speech last night. All what they are doing, they are reading. Ne? You've seen that. Compared to a politician who receives a speech, takes time, internalizes, engages the heart. The delivery, chalk and cheese. Because when there's alignment like that, then when you get to the hands, which is implementation, you implement better that which you have engaged with your heart, grappled with your head. Therefore, your implementation is more believable. Because if I go back to the traffic, whatever example, is that if I do not see a traffic official there, I will not speed, even if I'm late for my meeting, because I have bought into the concept of safety. Not because I see somebody else. So, whenever we have to understand, even those people who work in safety, it actually works all the way that we need to align so that whatever we do is really authentic. So what do you think stands in the way? Because some of these things I'm saying you have heard, what stands in the way of behavior change? If I ask you that on average, what percentage of people do you think make a sustained behavior change after a good learning intervention? Percentage-wise? 50, 22%, 20%. Okay, the latest statistics is this. If this is 100%, let's say people are in a good learning intervention, that only 15% of the people will make a sustained behavior change. Even that small percentage has conditions. That learning has to be relevant, it has to be talking to you, and then 15% will make a sustained behavior change. The people who are indicated in yellow, 70% of the people are what we call the New Year resolution people, right? After you are out of this room, you are excited, you've learned new thing, and then you say, I'm going to implement, I'm going to do this, and then after 3 months, fizzles, ne? And this further research says the 15% in red, these ones should not even have bothered to come to a learning intervention. These are the ones when they leave here, when they leave this room, everything that they have learned belonged to Makulu room. They just go back to work and they say, they don't even reflect even on one concept, and they're waiting for next year, IPM, they come to another conference. These people are there in life, right? And it's important for us to note, and why I'm emphasizing that we've been talking transformation, we've been talking some of these learning things, and what you might know of something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. This says, if you picture the y-axis and compare with the x-axis, on the y-axis is the percentage of time it takes, okay, for people to retain information. It says if you are in them, like right now, if there's a concept that I'm talking about 100% of people will remember that. Do you know that 1 hour later, your percentage of retention drops to 60%? Ne? 6 days later, 30%. 30 days later, you only retain 20%. This is important for us to emphasize why we have to be re-emphasized, why we've been traveling the same journey that we've been talking about. So what do we need? There are 4 conditions that are needed. What do we need in order for us to change? There are 4 things. We need understanding and belief. You need to understand, even people who presented before me, whatever, everything, there needs to be understanding, and you need to believe that message. Only then will you change. Secondly, you need capability. There needs to be capability, to be capable, to be equipped, and then you need to be willing. And the third one, opportunity to try it out. How many times have people gone to training, and then they go back to work, and your supervisor says, listen, leave that theory there. Here, you've come to work. They've paid for the training. When you try and implement, they say, listen, this is now work, okay? And then the fourth one is called motivation. There needs to be motivation. The reason why we're not even seeing advance with regards to issues of transformation and that, there needs to be motivation and incentives. And incentives doesn't mean money. There's many ways in which you can see incentives. And in order to increase the 70% to the blue people, what is actually needed? If I give you an example under motivation, let's say I go to my doctor and my doctor says, Nene, you've got a heart condition, you've got high blood pressure or diabetes, you need to change your eating habits. At that time when I leave my doctor's room, I go straight to Pick n Pay or Woolworths and buy good, because I belong to the 70%, right? I buy good things because I'm scared. This is a new message. And then I get to my house and I say, we're going to change our eating habits, throw out everything in the fridge. After 6 months, I said, everyone is going to die. And we just go back to eat. This is what people do, right? Anyone, anyway, and people give themselves excuses that I've seen people who go to gym who are dead. So there's a lot of excuses we give. So motivation and incentive, there are people who've studied what we call behavioral economists. And what they know is that there are companies who do that if you go to Woolworths or Pick n Pay and buy this nice groceries, you are wearing your Apple Watch or whatever, the graph grows that you are getting points, right? And if you go to gym, there's something called Kuwai, right? And then you claim your smoothie. You must check those people who claim their smoothies. They stand like, I've got, how much is a smoothie? You can buy 10 smoothies. What it shows that they play around the behavior, the motivation. So if we want sustainable change, we need in the workplace to say, how do we motivate? How do we incentivize? The journey of transformation, guys, is painful. Sometimes it's long. We need to, these 4 things, believe me, they can work. My last slide that I want to show you quickly, we did a lot of roundup of findings as to what is happening in the narrative of transformation in the South African space. And we find that these following narratives are common. Number 1, you find groupings of people. 1, those we call change realists and optimists. People who say change is always disruptive, requires commitment, resilience. It's uncomfortable, it takes time, but it will be worth it. And then you find the second group, the transformation fatigued. When you come and you are saying, let's do it, they say, oh, please, Nene, really? Another survey? I'm not even coming to that workshop of yours. I've done it. I'm up to here. Okay? They are just switched off. And then you find the group that's called, what transformation are you talking about? Look at what is happening in the country with all the corruption and impunity. All black people are in power, but look, these are real, guys. We have engaged in organizations, or those who are saying we've all come here to do a job. This is a professional environment, not a place for emotions and soft issues. Please, let's just focus on the job, okay? And then you get the forget the past, who are saying, Nene, apartheid ended in 94, okay? Black people must just move on and stop pulling the race card. And you find, I'm not promoting Nike, you find those we call the just do it. They are saying, just fire all those who are resisting. Fire them, And if you do this, there will be change. And you find those who are called it's time up. They say, white people have been cushioned for far too long. I'm tired of educating them about their country. Time up. The last group is, let's get serious. If you look at the organization, not much has changed. Let's do work. We've done several of our focus groups and lots of our research. You can group this. Do you know that you can find all these 8 groupings in the same department? People in your company right now who belong to all these different groupings. And therefore, what it requires is, number 1, your resilience to work through the transformation. Is very easy to throw in the towel, right? That is why I didn't want to go deeply into the details of that. We will engage around generational issues, because this is broad. What we are coming across is that unless you deal with the fatigue, unless you deal with lack of commitment, unless you ensure that number 8 and number 1 and number 8 are more your critical mass in your organization, you will actually not get far. And it has worked, guys. I've got lots of examples of organizations who are traveling this journey, and it does indeed work for them. Let me rather stop here, because I don't want to take time for the next speaker. I'll deal with the next thing after questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince.
Oh, there's Zulu.